what are some of the most f***ed up things celebrities ever did? Before we start with the first story, please hit subscribe and ring the notification bell to stay updated with us. Story 1. George Wallace, the infamous pro-segregation governor of Alabama in the 60s, did not inform his wife that her doctor diagnosed her with cancer. Doctors during this time often told patients' relatives of their cancer diagnosis instead of the patient, especially if the patient was female. The reason was that she was running for governor as a surrogate for him since he had reached his term limits, and he thought that the diagnosis would negatively affect her chances of winning. She ended up finding out about it 4 years later during a visit to a gynecologist. But unfortunately, the cancer had progressed to the point that she died from it 3 years after learning that she had cancer and that her husband had known about it. He ended up successfully getting the term limits repealed and went on to serve a few more terms as governor. People forget about this, I'm assuming, because of all of the other shitty things he did. Story 2. In 1984, Vince Neil of Motley Crue was partying for hours with his friend Hanoi Rocks drummer Razzle Dingley. They ran out of alcohol, so they decided to drive to the liquor store while absolutely blasted. Neil lost control of the car and crashed into an oncoming vehicle, killing his friend Razzle and seriously injuring the occupants of the other car, giving them permanent brain damage. He should have been put away for a long time for murder. Instead, he got a slap on the wrist, 30 days in jail, $2.6 million in restitution, and 200 hours of community service. He didn't even complete the 30 days in jail. They let him out early. 40 years later, Vince is a free man who has committed 2 more DUIs, 5 assaults. 3 of the victims were women. 1 was a sex worker and 1 was his ex-girlfriend. All while committing the true unforgivable sin in the eyes of fans by singing really badly. Is this the absolute worst thing a celebrity ever did? No, but it's gross how little people talk about this absolute miscarriage of justice. Then again, I guess who gives a shit about Vince Neil these days? Story 3. Kevin Hart drunk drove, crashed a car Mulholland doctor, and then his bodyguard moved the passenger into the driver's seat to make it look like he was the one driving. He paid the driver to stay quiet. Meanwhile, he did the chat show tour. Everyone felt sorry for him and stood up and applauded when he walked out with a cane. He also made fun of a mentally challenged, pardon me if this term is incorrect, I mean no harm, would-be rapper into reclusiveness. His name was T-San, because of his resemblance to both celebrities. Hart would troll the man relentlessly on his YouTube channel, calling him stupid, amongst many other names. He also added the young man to some of his earlier material. In my opinion, the man had a right to dream whatever he wanted to. Kevin Hart is a piece of shit, and I'll spread this and what you've shared everywhere I go. He shouldn't be a celebrity and is not worthy of adoration and riches. Story 4. Mark Wahlberg beat an Asian Vietnam veteran unconscious just because he was Asian and then tried to have his hate crime charges dropped from his record 20 years later. I've always thought about this, and that kind of violence is sickening. Kate Moss had to do a photo shoot with Mark Wahlberg for Calvin Klein, and she was saying how rude he was and how uncomfortable he made her. I honestly believe he has a ton of skeletons in his closet. He now hides behind his religion. I don't believe he's a godly man. Obviously, only my opinion. Story 5. In 2007, Chris Benoit, a former WWE and WCW World Heavyweight Champion, drugged, tied up, suffocated both his wife and 7-year-old son before hanging himself in his home gym. Brain examinations done after his death showed he had such a severely damaged brain, it was similar to that of an 85-year-old Alzheimer's patient, and likely had an advanced form of dementia due to repeated concussions during his life. Once news came out about his double murder-suicide, he hasn't been mentioned on WETV or really any wrestling promotion since. Story 6. Kylie Jenner lied about getting lip filler and marketed her lip kits to a young and impressionable audience. She literally changed how thousands of young women looked at themselves, and I'll never forgive her for that. Yet in her family show's latest season, she cries about how everyone judges her based off her looks. As if she didn't brainwash young girls into thinking that looking like her was all natural without any work done. Another story, billionaire Kylie Jenner, when one of her staff was in an accident, almost died and needed $100,000 in medical care. Instead of just paying it with her pocket change, she set up a GoFundMe campaign to get her fans to pay the bill. The medical bills were less than what she pays for handbags. Story 7. Some lesser ones that likely won't appear on this list. Katy Perry's have been accused of sexual misconduct multiple times by her male assistant, a model on the set of her Teenage Dream video, and by her American Idol co-star for forcefully kissing a teenage boy that was performing. Butch Hartman, creator of Fairly Odd Parents, scammed fans into funding a platform for his own projects only for it to go nowhere, then refused to refund anyone and delete any mention of it on his socials. Lied about the intentions of said platform and had secretly planned to use it to convert kids to Christianity. Charged people ridiculous amounts of money for custom art that was usually traced or stolen. Blamed Tara Strong for her friend, the former actress who voiced Timmy Turner's suicide, and downplayed suicide and mental health issues. And his wife leads a sham faith-based healing group. Story 8. A reality TV star accused the president of being a Muslim communist that was born in Kenya. He used that lie as a platform to become a GOP candidate. One of his GOP rivals was born in Canada. Through a series of lies, schemes, dirty deals, and fascist speeches became president and tried a coup d'etat once he lost re-election. Literally the biggest and most consequential celebrity scandal in American history. Something that affects all of us and will likely do so for the rest of our lifetimes, and people are commenting with shaking rage about. Insignificant TV stars and their personal problems. Story 9. Davi Vanity of Blood on the Dance Floor is not only the ***iest musician ever, but the ***iest human being ever. Motherfucker lied about being a cosmetologist. Went to an 11-year-old girl's house pretending to give her a haircut, but in reality raped her. Fired his company vocalist after spending the night in jail, even though he went in to save the show while Davi was there. After one of his victims spoke out, he sent his fans to bully and threaten her for lying. Continued to bring underage girls onto his tour bus to have sex with. Never paid his other company vocalist and threatened him by taking his HIV medicine from him. He is the definition of scum, and he's not in prison. He is currently loose as we speak. Story 10. I don't know if people today realize just how important Bill Cosby was to children of the 70 seconds and 80 seconds. In an era where black actors and comics were just starting to become recognized, Cosby stood head and shoulders above them in the national consciousness. For kids of the 70s, he was on The Electric Company. Created and voiced Fat Albert's Saturday morning cartoon, had a reading segment, picture pages on Captain Kangaroo, and sold us Jell-O pudding. All this before his #1 rated Cosby Show. Finding out during this time he was drugging and raping women with his wife as an accomplice was absolutely shocking. It would be like finding out that Santa Claus was a serial killer. Story 11. Don King has been sued by Muhammad Ali for being underpaid $1 million in 1981, Larry Holmes for cheating him out of $10 million in purses, Tim Witherspoon for threatening to blackball him out of boxing if he did not sign contracts. That would have given 80% of his purses to Don, 50%, and Carl, 30%. King Mike Tyson for the obvious Terry Norris for similar underpayments, Evander Holyfield for tanking 4 fights. He was promised Lennox Lewis for specifically holding back a Tyson-Lewis match because King was salty. Bob Arum signed him another funny one from a guy who never got directly taken by King and knew how to negotiate. Look at Willie T. Ribbs, the first truly successful black racing driver, and through some interviews. Some of the fun sticking points. From a racing contract, he wanted a 30% management fee of all revenues. The standard for stickball sports is 3% for contract and 10 to 20% for appearances. For racing, it is in the 10 to 15% range for all revenue. And for other contexts, Willie Weber was Michael Schumacher's manager and was considered wildly expensive for getting, as well as a completely open-ended expense account, and no options in favor of Willie T. Story 12. Sharon Osbourne, wife of Ozzy, accidentally set her house on fire. She had an assistant because of rich people, who was sleeping in a house next to the house because rich people. She woke him up and had him carry out of the burning house because rich people, and for some reason he complied. So firefighters show up and he has now developed breathing problems and is receiving first aid and oxygen because he inhaled smoke from burnt wood, plaster, plastic, and all 9 Fahrenheit's the good shit. Sharon proceeded to violently remove his oxygen mask, give OT to her rat dogs, and ordered him to go back in to save more from burning down. Shortly after, she made a joke about it and the assistant didn't find it funny, so she fires him. She then bragged about it on some show, fully incapable of understanding how much of an elitist, out of touch, disgusting human being she is. No wonder her daughter thinks Spanish people are only good enough to clean Donald Trump's shit. The Osbourne family. My only consolation is that Ozzy is too senile to f*** off from this horrible family. For me, the Osbournes are lower than even the Kardashians. Story 13. Johnny Depp's really violent and disturbing doesn't get talked about enough for how f***ed up it all really is. He's just the funny, wholesome pirate guy and Wonka guy. He's innocent, Yeah, Amber Heard might be a terrible person too, but his history of violent behavior isn't talked about enough. Lots of arrests for being violent towards security guards. Accused of assaulting a crew member on the set of a movie, why isn't this talked about more? There's been recent images of him appearing frail and looking pretty poor, and everyone feels so bad for him. Why? Why do people feel so bad for a guy with a very violent past and very unhealthy lifestyle of smoking cigarettes and drinking every day? Another one that doesn't get talked about enough is Anthony Starr of The Boys being a very violent bag. That guy got drunk at a bar and got into a violent altercation with a guy much younger than him and smashed a bottle in the guy's head. But he's given a pass because he was drunk and he's such a good actor, love Homelander. Story 14. A verbal argument ensued, and Chris Brown pulled the vehicle over on an unknown street, reached over Robin F. with his right hand, opened the car door and attempted to force her out. Brown was unable to force Robin F. out of the vehicle because she was wearing a seatbelt. When he could not force her to exit, he took his right hand and shoved her head against the passenger window of the vehicle, causing an approximate 1-inch raised circular contusion. Robin F. turned to face Brown, and he punched her in the left eye with his right hand. He then drove away in the vehicle and continued to punch her in the face with his right hand while steering the vehicle with his left hand. The assault caused Robin F.'s mouth to fill with blood and blood to splatter all over her clothing and the interior of the vehicle. Brown looked at Robin F. and stated, "I'm going to beat the shit out of you when we get home. You wait and see," the detective said. Robin F. then used her cell phone to call her personal assistant Jennifer Rosales, who did not answer. Robin F. pretended to talk to her and stated, "I'm on my way home. Make sure the police are there when I get there." After Robin F. faked the call, Brown looked at her and stated, "You just did the stupidest thing ever. Now I'm really going to kill you." Brown resumed punching Robin F., and she interlocked her fingers behind her head and brought her elbows forward to protect her face. She then bent over at the waist, placing her elbows and face near her lap in an attempt to protect her face and head from the barrage of punches being levied upon her by Brown. Brown continued to punch Robin F. on her left arm and hand, causing her to suffer a contusion on her left triceps, say that was approximately 2 inches in diameter, and numerous contusions on her left hand. Robin F. then attempted to send a text message to her other personal assistant. Melissa Ford Brown snatched the cellular telephone out of her hand and threw it out of the window onto an unknown street. Brown continued driving, and Robin F. observed his cellular telephone sitting in his lap. She picked up the cellular telephone with her left hand, and before she could make a call, he placed her in a headlock with his right hand and continued to drive the vehicle with his left hand. Brown pulled Robin F. close to him and bit her on her left ear. She was able to feel the vehicle swerving from right to left as Brown sped away. He stopped the vehicle in front of 333 North June Street, and Robin F. turned off the car, removed the key from the ignition and sat on it. Brown did not know what she did with the key and began punching her in the face and arms. He then placed her in a headlock, positioning the front of her throat between his bicep and forearm. Brown began applying pressure to Robin F.'s left and right carotid arteries, causing her to be unable to breathe, and she began to lose consciousness. She reached up with her left hand and began attempting to gouge his eyes in an attempt to free herself. Brown bit her left ring and middle fingers and then released her. While Brown continued to punch her, she turned around and placed her back against the passenger door. She brought her knees to her chest, placed her feet against Brown's body and began pushing him away. Brown continued to punch her on the legs and feet, causing several contusions. Robin F. began screaming for help, and Brown exited the vehicle and walked away. A resident in the neighborhood heard Robin F.'s plea for help and called, causing a police response. An investigation was conducted, and Robin F. was issued a domestic violence emergency protective order. Story 15. Alfred Hitchcock is remembered as one of the greatest directors of the Golden Age, but what he did to Tippi Hedren, my God, he saw her in a commercial and put her under contract so he could cast her in his movies, The Birds and Marnie. It was soon obvious he was trying to get with her, and he forced himself on her while they were in his limo and she couldn't run anywhere. He also ordered the other crew members not to socialize with her, and he'd get very annoyed if he saw her talking to another man. Rod Taylor said he was told repeatedly, "Don't touch the girl after I call cut." Her own daughter, Melanie Griffith, said he wouldn't let her visit her at the studio. In the former, the scene of Melanie being attacked by birds in the upstairs room she described as the worst week of my life. He lied to her that they'd be using mechanical birds, and she arrived on set to find real ones that were then tied to her costume and also thrown at her for the sake of the scene. After nearly losing an eye, She was so distressed that the studio doctor ordered a week's bed rest for her, and Hitch tried to stop him. But he was like, "Are you trying to kill her?" And she suspects that was his way of punishing her for turning him down. During Marnie, he had her followed, made sure her dressing room was next to his with a connecting door, tried to micromanage her career, forced himself on her again in his office. Told her he expected her to make herself sexually available to him at all times, and even did creepy things like commissioning a replica mask of her face for himself. It's extremely telling that the film has a scene where her character is saved on her honeymoon and later falls for the man who did it. Even at the time, everyone told him to change that, saying it was impossible to sympathize with the male lead afterwards, but he pushed it through. Once it became clear she wasn't going to return his advances, he blocked the studio from submitting her performance for Oscar consideration. Trashed her reputation to anyone who'd listen, and kept her under contract for 2 more years, refusing to let her work with anyone else so that the hype around her had died down by the time it expired. The studios were too afraid to antagonize him, so her career just didn't recover. Hedren herself also has one, although it's more of an extended, "Wow, are you an idiot?" She wanted to make a film called Roar using real wild animals, as in she wanted 40 lions, and no one in Hollywood would loan them to her. So she adopted them and had them live in her house. With her children, she eventually got a ranch where she rescued even more animals that she then used in the film. The exact number of injuries was never confirmed, but it was at least 70 people who were hurt in the making of that film, infamously the director's son getting his head clamped by a lion that held on for about 25 minutes. And he needed 56 stitches afterwards. Jan de Bon was the cinematographer and needed 200 stitches after one attack that nearly scalped him. Melanie Griffith, who was still a minor at the time, got mauled by a lion and needed reconstructive surgery, and she became addicted to painkillers afterwards, partly because of this. Hedren would later admit what a stupid idea the film was. Alright folks, that's a wrap. If you like this, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. You can also share your thoughts in the comment below.